Hi, everyone, and Happy New Year. I am so excited to introduce you to our special guest today. She's not only an incredible singer and violinist, but she's also a composer, and we've had the pleasure of commissioning her for the Hear Her Song project on a very special song. But I'm also really touched because she's my friend and she's someone who I really admire for the work that she's doing in the field, which she'll be telling you about. So, welcome, Mazz Swift. Thank you
Hi,
for being with us.
thank you for having me.
Well, Maz, I want to ask you a couple questions, starting with what was your first musical memory?
Man, I've been trying to think about this, and I would have to say it would be church choir. My
Mm.
parents, my dad really was the director of the church choir, and my mom was part of that. And so, yeah, very young age, going and singing with them. Yeah.
Yeah, I that those experiences are so powerful. I do you feel like you still connect back to that, or is that just like a certain time in your life?
Yeah, sometimes I do, but yeah, it's funny because like whenever I tell people that, I think people imagine like this gospel church, and we didn't go to that kind of church at all. So it was really the first thing that kind of hit to me to classical like choral music
Yeah.
actually. So yeah, I think I kind of fall back on that, and then I also there's parts of me that are always trying to get away from that as well. Just be kind of try and find my own voice. But that's usually like that's my first sort of memory of making music, and but also my father was really into jazz. Like he's of that sort of era of like bebop
Uh-huh.
and so that was also another thing. Those are also some really great early memories of jazz on Sundays, or like he would take us to these jazz brunches, where they would like,
Yeah.
play. Actually, they'd be broadcasting live, like jazz radio, and we'd be eating like soul food and whatnot. So like, there's some really fun memories as well. Yeah.
That's cool. No, and thank you for clarifying about church also because yeah, I think it's important that we don't have any preconceived notions of anything. And I mean from my perspective, I was it was similar that I really learned a lot about singing through that choral experience. Yeah, so much to talk about there. But I want to dive more into sort of your varying influences because one thing that really stands out about Maz, about you, is like your music is how varied it is, which I think is so cool. So I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about like your artistic input and these influences, like I know classical, you've mentioned, folk, rock, jazz, improvisation and electronica. How does that all come together? How do you inform a piece and fuse it with these different elements? What's your process like?
That's a really good question too. So again, classical music. At the time, when I learned violin when I was a very little kid, I kind of didn't realize that you could do anything with the violin.
Uh-huh.
Excuse me. So obviously, classical music was really my first love, and then again, the jazz. Just growing up with it, these are really the sounds from my childhood. And then I think like somewhere during college, I went to Juilliard, and sometime during then, I kind of discovered like Stefan Grappelli and that whole sort of like hot jazz thing. And then I really started thinking about improvisation,
Huh.
and I was really thinking about it from a jazz perspective. Like I didn't realize even that there was improvisation that was genre free or like, you
Yeah.
know, non-genre specific improv. So that was like part of my journey actually was dropping out of conservatory to go learn how to play jazz when really all I wanted to do was improvise. And um, long story short, I kind of eventually years later fell in with an amazing group of people called Burnt Sugar, which is started by Greg Tate, and used Butch Morris's system of conduction, which is like hand signals and gestures, to basically that, help people improvise in a group setting. So you have a
Huh.
conductor there, and he'll do all kinds of things, and we all respond to it, and that's how we kind of create a piece in the moment. And that kind of exploded my mind and my imagination. And the group Burnt Sugar itself had all of these different people from different backgrounds as part of it. So immediately it was already like kind of classical, like definitely like hard funk, lots of jazz, and so it was all of these things sort of swirling around me, and that really spoke to me because I'm an omnivore. Like I really love all the kinds of music. And then like sort of as a sidebar, like at the same time that I was sort of really diving into this improv, like free improvisation thing, I really was kind of getting into Irish music. It was just like I had heard it, I heard fiddle, and I was like, that sounds amazing. And it also sounds like challenging, but I feel like I could do it. And so that music always spoke to me.
Mm.
And I just started going to the Irish bars. At the time, you could go like hear live Irish music 7 days a week in New York City. It was crazy. Um, and just sitting down with the people who were playing, and I sat down with this guy Tony DeMarco, who they called the Trad Father. He's this Italian guy who plays like the sweetest Irish music, and I would just sit there and bring a tape recorder, yes, tape recorder, and
I remember those.
and record, and then take it home and like learn the stuff by ear. And so I was like really just starting to learn that, and it just feels like just part of my soul. Like it's like a part of me that really identifies with it. And that kind of brought me to thinking about the role of Black American musicians in what we call country music, like folk and country music, and how it seems like we as a culture have really moved away from, like, it really, in my mind, it always seemed like a quote unquote white music, like it's a
Mm.
thing that white people do. And it is very white a lot, in, I don't want to say mainstream culture, but like, when you see it, it's often white folks playing it, and so I really was thinking about just the contribution that we made to this music, and how real that is. And so like just starting to learn about the old fiddlers that were playing this music, and the context in which they were doing it, and the way that the enslaved people would take the music that they heard that was coming in at them from all sort of directions, and then like turn it into this style of music that has contributed to the American sound. So that was also really important to me. And so that's how all of those things sort of folded into what I do. I'm into all different kinds of folk music, actually. I've played gypsy music with Hungarian gypsies, again, the Irish stuff. And yeah, no, it's really important to me. Just the sort of the roots. And of course, rock is rock. It's awesome. So I'm always trying to do that as well. So
I mean, I have so many questions and I don't want to diverge too much, but what really strikes me is that you use the word omnivore. And I feel like your curiosity and you're willing to explore and try these different genres is very unique. I mean, the next question I want to ask you is really about how your experiences performing and improvising informed your influence or influenced you as a composer. But I mean, I just maybe want to go back a step and also think about like how did you start improvising? Because most classical or classically trained musicians, instrumentalists, I think especially, like they don't really go over that line. It can be a very scary thing. So yeah, how do you navigate like those different worlds, and how does it inform your composing?
Okay, so yeah, that was a very long process. Leaving school and, like I said, just trying to learn how to improvise was not easy, because every time I would play something, I hated it. There was this thing of like, wanting it to be perfect, but then also not wanting it to sound like a classical person trying to play jazz improv or whatever. So yeah, to be honest, I had such a hard time that I quit the violin. Actually, I didn't play for 2 whole years. And I
Oh,
went on a journey of like, I traveled, I lived on a farm. I, worked with goats and learned how to make cheese and lay bricks and like just do everything else. I kind of really moved away from music. And then um actually on this farm, they had a band and it wasn't a part of it, but they had this whole thing about improv as a way to like be in the moment and make music. And that was the first time I had really thought about improv outside of the jazz format, because they were really
mm,
coming from like a rock as and self-taught thing. So I think the thing that helped me with that was being around people that were free and like sort of modeled that for me. And then I also actually was like, maybe I'll start experimenting with pedals, like just plug the violin into some guitar pedals, like, you know delay and all of that, like just sort of process the sound, and maybe that will sort of help me unlock this idea of like using noise versus playing like phrases and things. And that was really a great way to sort of move away from this idea that it has to be perfect and I have to know what it's going to be before I do it. It was, having the violin sound couched in all of these other sort of electronic weird things, helped to unlock my imagination. So that was really, I find that to be a great way, sort of gateway into a great way to do a gateway of into experimental and improvisation. Yeah, and that so those two things I think are really important. Like just thinking about it as making noise and shaping sound, sculpting sound,
uh-huh.
as well as like working with people that you really like and trust, and who like and trust you. So oh yeah, and I guess as far as how it affects my composition, like I've actually found it to be such a profound experience, this improvisation, this way of freely improvising. I feel like I've learned a lot about myself, um I find it to be a really powerful and transformative kind of thing. So I've just decided I'm going to put it in everything that I write. So a lot of conduction has made its way in, as well as the way, even if I'm right, like the piece I wrote for you, for example, there is no improv in there, but I began the writing process by improvising, and I do that a lot. Like I'll just improvise on my violin and record it, and then I sort of transcribe it and start moving things around, and then that then it starts to grow into a form. So that's really how I work.
My mind is like exploding. I mean, I kind of want to go back to the 2 years that you took off. And how you came back to it. Maz, I mean, you should really think about writing a book. You've had a pretty fascinating journey with all this. There's another element to your music, and I think to all of us as artists with what we do, and that for me is advocacy related. And I just wonder
Mm.
if you could talk about, like, do you feel your music enacts artistic advocacy? Do you see them as separate? How do you see any role being
Mm.
played through music in terms of trying to create awareness or change?
I personally feel a great responsibility to enlighten people to sort of the plight of oppressed peoples in general, and also to sort of be a kind of corrective, force for the education, over musical education. I feel like it's very one-sided in our society, and so I want to be part of the thing that sort of like levels the playing field and reminds people, what has happened here, and what truly American music is and all of that. But I really feel like it's important to say, like, just to any person who wants to write music and perform it, that the most important thing, the most revolutionary thing, and people say this all the time, but I truly believe it, is to stay true to yourself. Like you, like actually, you don't have to educate anyone. You don't have to have a cause or anything. Like the most important thing is to like be super creative and be super like truly authentically you. Like that right there is really hard work. And if all you want to do is like make beautiful things, and I say make beautiful things, and that it's you know, whatever's beautiful to you, and that itself is sort of revolutionary. So when I say like, for me, I like to make pretty things, but I also it's just my calling. But I don't think that that's necessarily the role of the artist in society. The role of the artist in society is to be an artist and be themselves, you know. um, so yeah, no, that, but that, you know, I do, I feel really, the more I get in touch with the sort of like my own personal roots and understanding of the beauty and depth and breadth and power of African American culture and how we are all affected by it on a global level, that actually makes me feel more centered, and so it's really important for myself, and I also think it's good for everybody else too. So yeah, that's
No, that's an amazing answer. And I think when you talk about, you know, knowing yourself and being true to yourself, maybe just I wonder if you have any advice to a younger or a peer artist of how do you go about that? Because that is quite challenging. And it sounds like you've been very introspective in your journey and you have a good sense of your own curiosity and exploring that throughout. But I just wonder if you have any advice to someone for that.
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking a lot about mindfulness actually, and meditation, and the two are not necessarily like they're 100% related, but you can be mindful without, you know, sitting down and oming, right? So
Yeah.
I think the thing about mindfulness is that you're just being, you are aware of right now, and you're doing it without judgment. And I feel like the judgment part of things can really affect your moment, and how you feel about yourself and the things that are coming out of you as a musician or as a person.
Mm,
And so I think, you know, a lot of us, a lot of creative people are very self-conscious actually, as
yeah.
well as self-aware, right? But the self-consciousness is, it can be, like you say, it can be scary to really, and it's just really difficult because also you think about influences on you and like what is free will and like, and
Right.
like I said before, like I'm, you know, a lot of my music is in reaction to the music that you know, grew up singing and playing. So so there's that. But to keep it simple, I think really just being aware of like what's going on with you and who you are, and not thinking of it as good or bad, but just as what is. And I think really making that a practice has in my own life helped me to be okay with whatever is, you know, like
Mm,
if what is happening now is what's happening now, and I'm not resisting it, I feel like that makes it easier to kind of figure out what's next and what I want to do. Like if I
mm,
live a life of not judging myself, then and anything is okay.
mhm, mhm.
So I feel like that's freeing. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's the way.
Yeah, yeah. To me, when I hear you say that, it parallels to some of the ideas that you expressed on improvisation and just this idea of acceptance as you go about a journey of exploration into something new. And I think that's really noble. I think this is a time, hopefully a year, where we do venture into new situations, better understanding people who are different, better understanding different cultures and their art forms. So it's just really a lot of what you're saying is resonating with me personally right now, and I'm so thankful. We have a, yeah, please.
to say about it is I like to think about it as being light on your toes. Like
Mm,
if you're weighed down with like judgments or preconceived notions of the way things are supposed to be, then you can't really be light on your toes. You can't really be free to like process what's happening in the moment and then react to it and make something, cool or that be really intentional. And I feel like that's really true on a lot of levels as far as cultural experiences and taking in other people and
yeah.
people that you don't necessarily jive with and like how to react to that. So yeah, I yes, yes, yes to everything you just said.
Well, no, you said it. Do you still improvise every day, or is that a part of your daily practice? I'm just curious.
I honestly don't have a daily practice. It's kind
Okay.
of not my it's just not my bag.
Yeah. Okay.
But it is very much a part. Like whenever I pick up my instrument, I do that is what I do. And then I'm also I'm a hired gun, so I'm also practicing for things, like learning other people's music. But I always begin with an improvisation. Just kind
Oh
of
man.
just to be like, where am I at today?
I'd love to hear some of those. But we have a great clip, a video that you've chosen to get to share with us. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Okay, so this was recorded for a Facebook Live streaming event called All Together Now, which is put together by an organization called Broadband. And and I think I'm trying to think of my process. I think what I ended up doing, and I've been doing this a lot lately with sort of online things, is like I'll sit and just play for a little while before I hit record or before I get onto the live streaming concert or whatever. And once I sort of get warmed up and get into it, then I'll just hit record. So it's like a continuation of an
Hmm.
improvisation.
Yeah.
Um, just like I kind of put myself in the mindset and then I hit record. That way you don't have to watch me sort of getting myself together musically, and it also feels like a nice, it feels like a continuum of my life. So that's what this was. I've used a couple different things. I have like a contact microphone that I have going through a processor. And then I also have my little setup here. I have a keyboard that I use for some electronic sounds, and I sort of do that off screen.
Uh-huh.
Um, I like to process my vocals, so there's a little bit of singing in there. It's all improvised. And I always love to sort of find out what I'm going to sing about as I do it. And I've been thinking about calling this When You Wake Up, because that's what I sing basically. When you wake up, I'll be here. And yeah, so I've got my violin running through some effects as well and some vocal processing, and I do some looping, and everything that you hear is created in the moment. I use my feet a lot, so it doesn't look like a lot here, but all the changing sounds and everything are it's me sort of manipulating my pedals to make all the different sounds and elements. So that's it.
That's amazing. That's so cool. I gotta say, this reminds me of this analogy of like ducks when we see them, going on a river or in the water. They just kind of glide, right? But then under the water, they're like going crazy.
Yeah, that's very good. I love that. That's very. I have to figure out a way to do like all the different angles so you can.
Yeah, we want to see those feet next time.
I'm like all of my like hi-fi brain is in the making of the music. I'm completely lo-fi everywhere else.
It doesn't sound like it. It sounds very impressive. And I know we're all gonna really look forward to the clip. And everyone, you guys can follow Maz on social media. We'll be sure to post that. Maz, thank you so much. It's been really inspiring as always with you. And just wish you a happy new year, and may this be better than 2020.
Yes, amen. And thank you, Carlos. Just so great to speak with you always. It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thank
Well,
you.
bye.